Now, continuing our series of leader interviews, we are joined in studio by Roderic O'Gorman of the Green Party, outgoing TD for Dublin West. You're very welcome. Thanks indeed for joining us on 6-1. An independent assessment of your manifesto says it's the third best in terms of climate change. That's got to hurt.
We've delivered consistently on climate over the last 4.5 years. That's why Ireland now has its lowest climate emissions in 30 years. We saw a 7% cut there last year.
Yes, but the assessment for Friends of the Earth said your manifesto lacked the big picture vision and bolder ambition of the higher ranked parties, didn't provide a path to reduce emissions at a steeper trajectory as needed, and policies on fossil fuel dependency, low income protection and below cost selling were weak.
We've made the big decisions. We took the Climate Act that was in place, that was toothless, that actually didn't have clear legally binding targets, the one that had been brought in by Fine Gael and Labour. We replaced it with one that is legally binding. We put in place the financial measures to make public transport cheaper. We put in place the financial measures to make energy retrofits more accessible to more people. And the outcome of that is seen in the fact that last year we saw 7% cuts. When we went into government, people said, you'll never do 7% in a year. We've done it, we've delivered, and in the next government we can do more.
OK, carbon taxes are a divisive issue. There's a lot of criticism of them from some of the other opposition parties. And the money is supposed to be ring-fenced for climate actions and for helping to climate-proof poorer households. The Controller and Auditor General found that only 61% of that money has been used on these supposedly ring-fence schemes. So can you see why people might think it's more of a revenue raiser than a climate action?
Well, plenty of parties criticise carbon tax, but they still bake in the money it raises into their own financial projections. Yeah. We're very clear on this. Carbon tax is one part of our approach to climate.
But what about that 61%? 40% of the money is missing.
So what that recognises in year one, in 2021, during COVID, some of the agricultural mechanisms for supporting environmentally friendly agricultural practices weren't in place yet. They are in place now, and we see the carbon tax supporting them, supporting the retrofit of low-income households. 6,000 of those households, completely free retrofits done this year, and also the improvements to the winter fuel allowance, which has grown every year of this government, funded by the carbon tax. That's protecting the most vulnerable people from the impacts of higher fuel prices.
You mentioned agriculture. John Downing in the Indo had a good line this morning, mentioning the Greens in rural Ireland is enough to make people see red and turn the air blue. Do you understand why people in rural Ireland don't like you?
Well, I think the people in Clare may well see green at this election. We've got a really strong candidate there who I think is in real contention for the final seat. But let's talk about what we've been able to do in this term of office for rural Ireland. The rollout of rural broadband to 300,000 homes. My colleague Oisin Smith delivered that. The support for farmers to allow them have solar panels on their buildings. Huge grants there through the TAM scheme. And the rollout of Local Link services. When we went into government, there were 20,000 journeys on Local Link every week. Now it's 100,000. Those are towns, those are villages linked up, which weren't in place previously. So we've delivered for rural Ireland. In
your manifesto, you recognise the environmental impact of nitrogen fertilisers, but I'm not clear what your position is on continuing the derogation from the Nitrates Directive. You say you'll plan for it coming to an end, but you don't say that you want it to come to an end, do you?
What's going to happen is the question of the nitrates derogation is a simple one of, do we meet water quality standards? There are other parties going out there promising that they're going to go to Europe and make a change. If Ireland improves its water quality to a sufficient degree, the derogation will continue. If we don't, the derogation will be lost. That's why the Green Party has been absolutely focused on putting in place the investment behind the Water Action Plan, so we can actually assure clean water for everybody living across our country, and at the same time secure those important links for farmers as well.
We saw a clip of you earlier on talking about red lines for government over this 10 billion euro investment in transport. You're planning to spend a big chunk of the Apple money on transport. Yeah. Other parties say they're going to use it for housing. Is it as simple as vote Green, you get a bus, vote for the others, you get a house?
No, it's not, because we'll put €4 billion of the Apple money into the Land Development Agency to let us us deliver more affordable purchase and affordable rental homes. But we have to be able to build communities as well. And that's why the public transport infrastructure that we need to grow, that we need to develop, and we need to do it all over the country as well. We need it in Dublin, we need it in our regional cities, and we need to continue the rollout of local link services that I spoke about earlier on across rural Ireland.
To talk about your own portfolio, a very broad mix of portfolios, but you are Minister for Children. In February, you were reported as saying that during your time as Minister, TUSLA had never caused me or this government a moment of concern. And that was at a time when 174 vulnerable children were in unregulated emergency accommodation. Last month, we learned that 37 children and young people have gone missing from TUSLA care. 53 children have died while known to or in TUSLA care in the last 3 years, including Kyron Dernan from Dundalk. Does any of that give you a moment of concern?
Well, nobody has focused, nobody has prioritised the support for our most vulnerable children than I have. I've increased TUSLA's investment by 50% over the lifetime of this government. I've supported foster carers who care for the vast majority of children in the care of TUSLA. I've increased their weekly allowance by €75 so we can continue to retain them. I've brought in new ways that TUSLA can hire more social workers in terms of the making agency staff permanent and new pathways for people to train as social workers. So I've focused on the delivery of those frontline services that TUSLA needs in order to be able to provide for these incredibly vulnerable children. TUSLA is the final safety net for so many of these children, and I've put in place the resources and I've put in place the staff so it can continue to do that important work.
OK, Roderic O'Gorman, Leader of the Green Party, thank you for joining us on 6-1.